Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today I want to talk about how can I prevent my partner from cheating, common reasons for cheating, and how to manage them. So let's start with the idea that I don't really like that word cheating. I think it implies something very negative and very kind of melodramatic, kind of in this idea that the person who cheats is always this, nefarious criminal, and the person who gets cheated on is always this weak, powerless damsel in distress. And I think part of my problem with it is that it's very heteronormative. It comes from the idea of, straight relationships, in kind of the old-fashioned misogynist way that women are weak and that strong men have to guard the cave and protect the little damsel in distress and her offspring from, going to another cave and having other offspring because women are too weak to fend for themselves. And if a man doesn't protect them in his paternalistic way by being faithful and protecting the little woman, that she will perish in her infinite feminine weakness. And you still have some of that today in straight relationships with women who have an abandonment rage about their husbands and call them, a big walking penis and all that stuff, because it implies that women are weak. And as Betty Friedan said, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. So I just kind of don't like it for gay relationships, the word cheating, because it just kind of conjures up this kind of sexist heteronormative point of view. Now I realize that's a little controversial, and just for today, for lack of a better word, let's just use the word cheating. But what I mean is that couples make agreements about monogamy versus non-monogamy. They define what monogamy is for themselves. Does that include three ways? Does that include porn? Does that include, do you get to have lunch with your ex-boyfriend? For some couples, cheating is, practically looking at any other guy. And for other couples, cheating might be violating one of the rules of an open relationship. And it has to do psychologically with certain vulnerabilities that humans have, all humans. There's a lot in psychological circles about the fear of abandonment, where, think of a baby who's being left alone when he wants his bottle. It's either, wah, 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 I'm so depressed, I don't get my bottle, nobody's listening to me, wah, 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 a depression, or it's, I'm crying, damn it, how dare you ignore me, I want my bottle and I want it right now, how dare you not be there for me, and that's the abandonment rage. So a lot of times in cheating, we have people who are feeling the abandonment rage. How dare you do this to me? Don't you know who I am? And it can sound a little narcissistic. But it's also the idea of dishonesty. A lot of people say in cheating that it's not the sex, it's the dishonesty. That we made an agreement that you weren't going to have sex with anybody else, and here you've gone and done it, and, then the fault is with you. And yet sometimes these dynamics are much more complicated than that. So rather than just having a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, you cheated, I'm going to find the nearest sharp object and cut your balls off, let's take a different look in slightly more rational ways. Now, over the years, it's been, in 2019, as of this recording, I've been in practice for over 27 years. I started when I was young, and I'm just old now. But I've been a specialist in working with gay men as a therapist, as individuals or couples. So with hundreds and hundreds of couples, I've seen a lot of this whole idea of cheating and how they get past it, which is maybe another episode, and also what tends to create an atmosphere where it can happen. So for this episode, if we understand more about why cheating happens, maybe we can prevent it, and maybe we can prevent some of that abandonment rage and abandonment depression that we're talking about. Now, on gaytherapyla.com, I have some blog articles about how to monogamy, how to have an open relationship without hurt feelings, the value and purpose of having a fuck buddy, or the right and wrong way to have a three-way. Not that there's a right and wrong way, but, there's some tips about having a good three-way. But I have yet to do a podcast on the reasons for cheating or breaking a monogamy agreement. So that's what this is about today. And of course, the first thing that people might say is that it depends on the person, the reasons for cheating or breaking a monogamy agreement. And that's true, but there aren't really 1,000 different reasons. There are a handful of reasons that keep coming up repeatedly in my practice over and over after many years of therapy for gay couples. And I've helped couples get through all of them without necessarily breaking up. So let's look at several of these. Number one, of course, is the physical. You have to remember that the cultural concept of monogamy, even for straight people, and even more so for gay men, is a cultural construct. Much like being a vegetarian or keeping kosher when you eat. It's very late evolution, high executive brain functioning, cultural context kind of stuff. It's not stem of the brain, primal, basic instinct stuff. So when guys cheat, it's possible that their old brain, primal instincts of wanting sex are taking over their new brain concepts like, don't do that because having sex with only one partner has symbolic meaning for you to represent love, intimacy, and social commitment. It's like people who are starving might steal food before they go hungry. The urge to eat is stronger than the moral issue that it's wrong to steal. Some would say that this is thinking with the little head and not the big head. But other times there can be a problem where your significant other has kind of let himself go after years of being in a relationship, and he isn't as attractive as he used to be. And I have a blog article on gaytherapyla.com called Spruce Up, being a good, attractive partner to your partner. And it's part of the covenant that you make as a couple, particularly a monogamous couple, to give your partner a sexually attractive partner. Now, you can't do anything about aging, but you can do some things about, letting yourself go and not taking care of yourself and not being there for your partner in an attractive and sexual way. And that's a problem. I've had to work with guys on that, and it's awkward to talk about, but a lot of times that's part of the physical cheating problem, is that your partner isn't as attractive as he used to be, and maybe there's something he could do about that. It's not necessarily his fault, but at the same time, if you have a monogamy agreement, there's kind of a covenant that says you're going to do your best to be as sexually attractive and sexually satisfying as possible. So, many guys cite unmet physical desires or even just sexual curiosities as the reasons that led them astray to break the monogamy agreement. So we say, with each one of these, I'm going to say this, what's the fix? What's the fix for this, for the physical reasons? Well, if you and your boyfriend or partner or spouse, I'm just going to say significant other from now on, need to have very frank, very explicit discussions about what your body, your cock, your ass, your mouth, needs and wants to be sexually satisfied. Sometimes the discussion needs to be about novel stimulation. Straight guys sometimes use the vulgar but descriptive phrase, sometimes you just want some strange pussy. So if you or your partner craves, on a very basic level, sexual variety, then that needs to be discussed. For many gay couples I've worked with in sessions in couples therapy, this can be satisfied by way of the occasional three-way, whereby playing together you share a third person and enjoy them together. I always say for couples, shared experience breeds intimacy over the life of a relationship. Sharing experiences, good or bad, bonds you over the history of time and makes for a rich, shared life together of adventures and feelings and memories. You can also vary and experiment with your sexual relationships so that things don't get too predictable or boring or stagnant, the same old thing. Try changing up the top and bottom roles. And if that's a problem for you, I've got other episodes on fear of topping and fear of bottoming. But address that. See if you can mix that up. Experiment with your kink sides. I wrote an article on gaytherapyla.com that says fear no leather, the benefits of BDSM play. Vary the time or place or style of your sex. Talk about, or if that's too embarrassing even with your partner to talk about stuff, write down some sexual fantasies and then exchange lists for your partner to read if it's too embarrassing to just, say out loud. And you might need to negotiate things that would turn you on and make agreements with your partner, such as reasonably managing weight or working out or thinking about what they look best in and stuff like that. If you're going to limit sex to one partner, be a sexy partner to each other. A monogamy agreement is a commitment to sex with one partner, not a commitment to celibacy. There's a big difference there. So let's look at the number 2 reason that I've seen for people who cheat, so to speak, or break the monogamy agreement, and that's emotional. We talked about the physical, now let's talk about the emotional. Sometimes cheating is about fulfilling an unmet emotional need. Someone might act out sexually and break a monogamy agreement if they feel unheard or unloved, ignored, belittled, or even unjustly criticized by their significant other. It can also be a maladaptive coping for a guy who's under too much stress at work. There's a blog article about toxic busy on gaytherapyla.com. And they might act that out by meeting up, with an escort boy or an erotic masseur to cope with working too many hours in a week, or dealing with an unreasonable or oppressive boss, or even workplace bullying. I've had some experience with that. And there's a blog article also on gaytherapyla.com about the risks and benefits of seeing escort boys, if you're interested in that. But emotional cheating, can be a coping for worry, such as a guy who might be facing a health crisis, having to take care of a sick parent. If you're middle-aged, you normally have some kind of parental caregiving role in our society. Or dealing with financial stress, dealing with a layoff or inadequate sales quota or some type of salary frustration. And while many might say that having sex can be a great way to relax, it's relatively cheap, if you're doing it in a way that needs to be kept secret, it creates added problems. There's an AA, I'm not in AA, but I like to steal their sayings. There's an AA saying that says, you're only as sick as your secrets. So if what you're doing sexually has to be kept secret from your partner, not just a privacy thing in an open relationship where your partner doesn't want to hear about outside sex, that's another topic. But if there's a secrecy to it, it usually means there's something dysfunctional going on. The difficult emotions, instead of being expressed and processed verbally, get acted out behaviorally. Now this might temporarily assuage the negative emotion, but then if the sex is kept secret and then later discovered by your significant other, there is hell to pay. And then the acting out sexually wasn't the best way to deal with the emotions. So if you're under emotional stress and that leads you to either cheating or maybe even an affair, try to return to your partner and get your emotional needs met from him. Tell him what you need. Tell him that you need him to be there for you in a way that maybe he just hasn't been. Maybe he needs to knock it off with the criticism, or maybe he's actually verbally abusive and that needs to be confronted. Or maybe you're going through something and you feel lonely in your own home and you've got to bring your partner into this and say, hey, I'm feeling lonely, coping with this, I need you to be there for me. And that can really breed intimacy in your relationship. What's the fix for the emotional risk of cheating? Well, basically, all negative emotions get better if we talk and communicate about them with another person. This is the whole point of talk therapy. If you feel your significant other just isn't getting it and understanding you, sit him down and talk about it. Tell him what you feel and ask him for what you need. Give him a chance to change how he's relating and responding to you. If you're having work stress, employ some stress management techniques like taking up yoga or mindfulness meditation or working out more or some kind of fun hobby, or maybe even taking an anxiety medication prescribed by a qualified psychiatrist. changing your work habits, or maybe it's even time to find a new job. Think about and speak about your stressors before you just actually act them out in secret. Now let's look at the third risk of cheating, and that's developmental stages of life and coping with aging. You know, people go through predictable life stages, and the great historical psychologist Erik Erikson said that there is both a challenge and a reward to every phase of life. I work with many guys at midlife, which is approximately 38 to 50, and cheating can sometimes be a way that a guy reassures himself that he has sexual clout or influence and gay community commercial value to someone besides his significant other. Straight men go through this too, where they want validation from younger women besides their wives. It's a reassurance to someone who's aging that his youth is not fading away, but his virility and sexuality are being validated, usually by someone much younger. It's kind of an ego boost to be a middle-aged gay man and still be desirable to younger gay men. Ooh, daddy. You know, especially if it's not just about, you know, younger guys being, you know, kind of gold diggers for daddy. It can be a temporary respite from feelings of security, or insecurity rather, aging, or even a fear of their own mortality. But unfortunately, you know, the ego stroke, so to speak, of having an affair or of cheating can anger and hurt your significant other, you know, if you're doing it on the sly. So we have to develop some insight about emotional cheating or physical cheating and affairs. Does it have to do with aging? What's the fix? Understanding that getting older is a fact of life, and you, just as you went from an infant boy to a school-age boy to a teenager to a young adult, so shall you continue from young man to middle-aged man to senior man. You know, everybody gets older. It's asking yourself, can I get older and still make that okay? It's practicing what dialectical behavioral therapy, which is one of the techniques I use in therapy, calls radical acceptance of what is, without having to panic over it. Your worth and value do not end just because your youthfulness fades. That's an important thing to think about. Talk about this with your significant other, whether he's younger or the same age or older than you. Try therapy to process your anxieties and insecurities about getting older, and make an art of how to age gracefully, emotionally and physically and socially. I have a blog series, really, about how gay men can age gracefully with therapy in all these different ways. And you have to look at the emotional and the physical and the social sides of what aging gracefully means. I also have a tab on my website about healthy aging, you know, and what does that mean? Even if the people in your family didn't age all that well before you, or even if they didn't make it to older ages. You know, some guys cheat because they are defending psychologically against an unconscious fear of their own death. You know, the movie Moonstruck, for which Cher won the Academy Award, explored this theme. As Olympia Dukakis' character discovered, you know, she really figured it out, that the reason why her husband was having an affair was because he feared death as he got older. But if you always put your self-esteem up for a vote by others, you know, based on youthfulness or classic handsomeness, you're likely to lose over time. You know, self-worth has to come from within, from all aspects of yourself, not just having a youthful appearance. You and your significant other might be at different phases of life, or you might be at the same phase, but handle it differently. So talk about this with your significant other and ask how you can both give and receive support for aging together. Let's look at another one. Number 4, emotional cheating risk or physical cheating risk because of the sense of self. So still other guys cheat because they have a long-standing insecurity about taking in lots of anti-gay rhetoric or oppression from others, such as bullying, or the cumulative effect of constant anti-gay messages in the media, usually from Republican politicians and religious conservatives who fan the flames of hate. Cheating with lots of guys can be a way that some men psychologically validate themselves after years of being put down with rhetoric or discrimination or abuse. Other guys might feel like they are underachievers because they don't have a big house or fancy car or whatever, and try to make up for that, for what they feel a lack of, just by having more sex. Now, okay, for some that might be fun, but when it's secret or when it's breaking a monogamy agreement, then the solution becomes bigger than the problem. So what's the fix for that? Having therapy to heal from past hurts, such as childhood abuse, bullying, or even past adult discrimination experiences, that can help a lot. Therapy can help you identify what you might be feeling, even unconsciously, from your family of origin stuff that affected your self-esteem and your self-concept, your view of yourself. Overcoming self-doubt and building self-esteem and self-confidence to improve your career, your income, your health, your relationships, and your place in the community are probably the most common issues that I help guys with in my practice, because so many guys need help and support with this after growing up in a still generally homophobic society. It's getting better, but we always have to think a little bit about, how all the anti-gay stuff has affected us from growing up, because it's a lot of negative messages that we have to psychologically defend against, and yet somehow have an intact self-esteem about it. So let's look at number 5 in the risks of cheating, is social status and entitlement. Some men have narcissistic personality disorder and feel that the rules that apply to little people don't apply to them, so they feel under no obligation to honor a monogamy agreement or any other restriction on what they want when they want it. Perhaps the most high-profile reason for cheating comes from guys in the media, usually straight guys, who have so much income and status and fame and privilege that their ego gets really inflated, and they start to assume that they are immune to anyone telling them no. Tiger Woods comes to mind, incredibly rich, handsome, and validated by society for being a superb athlete, as a star golfer. Movie stars and politicians are also powerful, rich men, and that translates into a virility for straight men towards straight women. And this dynamic is perhaps less common with gay men, but when any guy becomes rich, powerful, constantly validated, and enjoys unusual social privilege, the best restaurant tables, lots of yes men and yes people around him, fame, adulation, gifts, favors, compliments, popularity, it's very easy to forget a monogamy agreement and feel that one is entitled to do what he wants, when he wants, with whomever he wants. So what's the fix for that, for social status and entitlement cheating? If you're someone who has perhaps recently achieved a lot of status, such as you have a powerful, a high-paying job with lots of people validating you and telling you how great you are, remember that being a classy gentleman means that character is what you do when no one is looking. Just because your looks or your status can attract a lot of potential sex partners doesn't mean that you have to say yes to their wily, seductive ways and manipulations. I always say sexual self-empowerment is saying yes when you want to say yes and no when you want to say no, without guilt or explanation. So, coping with status and power means that you self-regulate, another dialectical behavioral therapy concept. You self-regulate when you do things and when you don't. It's a skill that every gay man has to have, which is how to say no gracefully. Because in both monogamous relationships and even in open relationships that have rules, the ability to say no assertively is an important task that you need to have in your personal repertoire of interpersonal skills. It's part of the commitment that you've made to your partner, and that has value and meaning. And when you keep your commitments, when AA says this also, when you keep your commitments and you hold your head high, it can raise your self-esteem and your self-concept and make you feel good about yourself. So resist the urges to keep up with the next guy in competition, and resist the social pressures that you have to act like a Casanova to fulfill some kind of supersed social status or expectation, that's based on your looks or status. You don't have to give in to that just because you're pressured to. 6, the last one in terms of the cheating risk is family of origin. Some guys cheat because the relationship skills that were modeled for them in their family of origin growing up were not very good. maybe when you were a kid, you saw your dad cheat on your mom, or your mom cheat on your dad, or both. Or maybe your parents divorced when you were so young that you had no models for good relationship skills in your whole upbringing. Maybe it's hard to have a strong relationship if you've never seen a strong, healthy, happy relationship modeled for you, and what that looks like, so that you can kind of copy it for yourself. As an adult, you have to find your own way and negotiate a way of living with your partner that works for you and works for him, even if it wouldn't work for anyone else. You and your partner get to create what is best for you, especially on that spectrum between monogamy versus non-monogamy, and what the ground rules are and what's important to each of you. And it's really no one else's business. You don't owe it to anyone to make excuses for the kind of relationship and the kind of agreements that you've made with your significant other. But if your family of origin relationships were a mess, and you find yourself kind of following suit with a series of chaotic relationships, then therapy might help you come to terms with how to resist the negative influences of your past, and you carve out a new future for yourself, so that you're not doomed to just repeat the patterns that you saw growing up in dysfunctionality. What's the fix, for these family of origin risks? Think about what seemed to work in the relationships that you witnessed growing up, whether it was your parents or your grandparents, an aunt or an uncle, your older siblings, the neighbors, and even on TV. I always joke, everything I learned about relationships I learned watching Bewitched, because, if you know that show about the witch and the mortal living in the suburbs, they could go through hell in the course of a half an hour. The mother-in-law would turn the husband into a monkey and, all of that. But by the end of the episode, they always kissed and made up, because the theme of that show that the creators were focused on with all this magic about the witch was that love is the greatest magic of all. And if you watch that show with that theme, love is the greatest magic of all, you'll see some really positive messages about how couples can go through all kinds of hell and still kiss and make up by the end of a 23-minute episode. So think about the positive relationships that you've seen, even if they're heterosexual ones, and kind of make the translation, and think about how you can have that kind of relationship for yourself and your partner. Think about what a satisfying and enduring relationship would look and feel like for you, and then assert this to your partner. Negotiate with him on what he feels would work for him too, and say joining language like, how about if we agree to blah blah blah? How about if we agree to not blah blah blah? And together you create a dynamic and an everyday lifestyle that works for you, even if it needs an occasional tune-up, which is what couples therapy is for, or even if it changes or evolves over time. A lot of guys who are younger that have monogamous relationships might have a non-monogamous relationship after many years of being together. I've done that with a lot of couples, and they do it in a way that's very sensitive and very loving and very gentle and very gradual. But I do think therapy helps. So to sum up, preventing cheating, so to speak, involves understanding your physical, emotional, and social dynamics within and around your relationship. When you focus on making your relationship work for you and your partner emotionally, physically, and domestically, and managing the stressors that impact your relationship from the outside in, you ensure your relationship is sound from any stressors or forces that would undermine it. It's a very homophobic, old-fashioned myth that even gay relationships don't last. That's crap. You have the power to create the relationship you want. So if you need help with this, think about individual or couples therapy or coaching to help you strengthen the relationship that you and your partner want to create together. So you can always call me or text me at 310, area code 310-339-5778, or email me at ken@gaytherapyla.com. So thank you for listening. Please leave reviews of the podcast. I kind of need those. Share this with other gay men you think might benefit from this podcast show. And also feel free to get in touch with me if you want to suggest some topics for future episodes. And there's a lot more blog articles and information about therapy and coaching with me at gaytherapyla.com, so feel free to visit the website. Thanks.